So what does this mean for us? What do all of these theories mean for us in practice? In community college, you're going to have and at Northwest Shoals in particular, you all have seen, or you will see, that there's not a whole lot of involvement with the institution from our students, and especially with online students, there's going to be even less involvement and possibly zero involvement with the institution. Right. So what does student development theory say about that? Well, we just talked about with Aston's theory of involvement and Tinto's theory of departure that the more involved a student is, the less likely they are to drop out. So the opposite of that is true. The less likely, the less involved they are, the more likely they are to drop out. So with our online students, there's a very good possibility that they will have very, very little to no involvement with the institution. You're also going to have little to no interaction with faculty. Now, this is something that you can personally impact, right? You might not necessarily be able to do a whole lot about this. You might not be able to affect the involvement with the institution, but you can affect this, right? You can affect what kind of interaction or the quantity or the frequency with which your students interact with you, or at least provide more opportunities for that to take place. Your community college students are, overall going to be at the lower stages of intellectual development. This is not necessarily to say that they are lower on the cognitive development scale. What I'm referring to is that they're going to have this idea, or they're more likely to have this dualistic idea of knowledge of things are right or wrong, and there's not a whole lot of gray area in between. So going back to Perry's theory of cognitive development, they're more likely to be in the early stages of dualism, or possibly the early stages of multiplicity, where they're beginning to see that, okay, yes, there is more than one perspective. There is more than one way to look at things, and there is kind of some gray area, and things are not always necessarily black and white, cut and dried, right and wrong. Community colleges enroll a very large percentage of first-time and first-generation students, which, again, in general, means that you're going to be looking at having a larger percentage of lower socioeconomic status students, right? Their parents don't make as much money. They don't make as much money. For a lot of them, that's why they're here, because community college is cheaper. And so as a result of that, you get students that come from backgrounds of lower socioeconomic status. As a result of that, also, you have students that are more academically unprepared, more socially and emotionally underdeveloped. So these are just consequences of being in the community college. These are just the students that you're naturally going to see. This is why community colleges exist, to create access for these populations of students. So it's important to realize that, if we're getting these students, where are they in terms of their development as people, right? How do they view the world? How do they view knowledge? Do they view it as cut and dried, right and wrong? Or do they realize that, there are multiple ways of looking at situations, and that everyone is entitled to their own opinion, and everyone's opinion should be respected? So what is the importance of student development theory? We just talked about all of the different kind of characteristics that you can expect to see from community college students as they come in. So it provides us a lens to be able to look at our students and kind of answer the questions of, okay, where are they and where are they headed, and what can I do to help them get there? And they just haven't developed past a certain point yet. They're at a certain point in their development, cognitively and socially, and how they view the world in general. And there's not anything that they can really do about that. They're just at certain points in their development. And so you have to just, not necessarily look at every student and say, okay, what vector, which one of Chickering's vectors is this student at? But, if you take student development theory as a whole, and you kind of know in general what the progression is of how students develop, and how they go from viewing the world as 18-year-olds to 25-year-olds, then it kind of gives you a little bit more empathy for them when they do and say certain things and behave in certain ways, and it gives you a little bit more of an ability to make decisions in terms of how are you going to be able to take them from where they're at in their development outside of the academic realm, and move them forward to the point where they can begin to develop into mature civil human beings. It provides a common body of knowledge for us to be able to communicate across the institution. So this way, faculty and advisors and counselors and student success personnel, if everyone knows a little bit about student development theory, then we can all kind of, we don't have to sit around throwing out again, which vector of Chickering's stages do you think this student is at, or in what position of knowing from Perry's theory do you think this student is at? But it does kind of, provide us a common frame of reference to begin to have conversations where we're kind of more or less speaking the same language, and are able to work together a little more effectively to help our students progress and develop. And then as a result of that, we're able to create policy and practice that does facilitate the holistic development of our students. And one of those questions that we talked about in the beginning of the presentation that student development theory should answer is, what developmental outcomes should we strive to achieve in our students in college? And personally, I believe that we should strive to develop our students in all areas, not just academically. And so the field of student development theory, it provides this common body of knowledge for us to be able to work together and create policy, and to do things on a day-to-day basis that help us to facilitate our students in more holistic ways, and start to look at their identity development and their social development in maybe the not as significant as a light of their academic development, but at least we're getting to the point where we're trying to develop them in those areas. So now that we have talked a bit about student development theory, let's talk about our discussion prompts. So in all fields, theory is really only as useful if we're able to take that theory and apply it in our day-to-day work. So what I want you to do is to take one of the theories that we talked about today, or maybe you are very familiar with some other development theory. There's also a list that I've provided in the additional resources section on the Moodle page. So if you would like to go, if none of these kind of tickled your fancy, so to speak, if none of these really sparked anything for you, then take a look at that list and pick one there and do a quick Google search and get some info on it and use that one. But what I want you to do is to just take one development theory And I want you to list the challenges that you see that are specific to the online learning environment, and taking that theory and moving it into practice. And then list one strategy that you can use to overcome that. So how is there going to be a challenge in taking your theory into practice, and then how are you going to overcome that challenge? I look forward to reading your discussion prompts or your responses to the discussion prompt. So I will see you in the next module.